Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Cohen, and on today's episode, I have Angela Stanton. Angela has a PhD in Neuroeconomics, which is a research field that looks at how hormonal variations of the brain affect the decisions people make. She now focuses on researching brain function and how it relates to chronic pain. She is a participating author in the textbook called Encyclopedia of the Mind, and she has published her own book called Fighting the Migraine Epidemic, Complete Guide, How to Treat and Prevent Migraines Without Medications. Angela, thank you so much for coming on to the episode for today.
Thanks, Gary. Really nice that you invited me. I'm flattered. Thank you.
No problems. Well, you've got some exciting research that you've done, and you've got your own protocol, which is all to do with headaches and specifically migraines. And I think the information that you've shared in your book, which I've had a chance to read a bit, is really exciting for people who suffer migraines. I mean, I personally know some people who suffer migraines, and it's a problem. So I'm really excited to try find out from you today, what can people do to both prevent and help it when they're in pain?
Very good. Yes, it's. I think it's, over 15% of the population is diagnosed as migraineur, so it is a much bigger problem than it is understood.
Yeah. So my first question for you then is, how would you explain the difference between a migraine headache and a normal headache, or like a tension type headache?
Okay, there are a lot of differences. I think that the most important difference perhaps is when you get a normal headache, a tension, or otherwise, it's just a headache. You don't have any precursing like a prodrome. You don't have any sensations before that. You can take usually some over-the-counter medications and it goes away. When you have a migraine, you have oftentimes up to 2 days of prodromes, and the prodromes can be sensitivity to light, scent. These are well known. It could be aura, which may be a little bit sooner, closer to the side of the migraine. People can get extremely hyper, almost like as if they were, just ready to hike the biggest mountain, or they can be depressed. So you have a lot of emotional variability, and these are all hormonal. And in addition to that, many of the migraineurs have metabolic changes. They may start vomiting, have nausea, they may get dizzy, vertigo. These are the signs that are really uncomfortable. Then there are signs, for example, for me, one of my eyes will become smaller. I didn't know that. This is part of the book, how it was discovered. And since then, I have worked with over 4,000 migraineurs. This seems to be a universal symptom. This you don't find with any other kind of headaches.
That's interesting. So your actual pupil will change on the one side.
It's not the pupil. It's the size of the eye. Apparently, the migraine part of the brain, where the brain is not functioning properly, it's not getting enough sodium, which we're going to talk about later, doesn't allow the muscles to work. So the eye literally isn't able to open up.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the words you used earlier, just for people who wouldn't maybe heard it before, prodromes, that's something like a symptom that happens before the actual condition occurs?
Right. It's a chain of events. So some people only get one prodrome, maybe yawning. That is a very typical migraine prodrome, starting approximately 1 to 2 hours before the migraine. That would be a prodrome very specific to migraine.
Yawning.
Yawning.
Wow.
And that is part of the chain reaction of all the hormonal startups. So migraine start is a release of an anxiety hormone cascade, which was triggered today by nothing. It could be by a plane flying by, or a fragrance and a perfume counter, somebody spraying out, and it's really strong. It's a perceived danger. But in ancient times, this would have been danger. So here we come to something more complicated, which is associated with what is called a hyperexcitable brain of the migraineur. It's a busy brain. So we have different brains from the standard brain. And when this cascade is alerted for whatever reason, it releases a whole lot of hormones, which you would refer to as fight or flight hormones. So a migraineur will go through releasing of adrenaline, increasing heartbeat, all the digestion shuts down, hence what I was saying with the, vomiting and other things. It's a whole set of steps that is pretty much the same for every single migraineur. And so the cascade events because you start increasing, your blood pressure increases, your heartbeats increase, you need more air, hence yawning.
Okay, interesting. I've heard of a lot of the different symptoms that people can have with a migraine, and maybe see, like you mentioned that word aura before. So this, when some people can see the little dots in their vision, or they're more sensitive to smells or something. But the yawning, that's interesting. I haven't heard that one before.
Most people don't know these, because when a migraineur goes to a doctor or goes to the emergency room for treatment, she's already past that stage. And most of them may not even remember until they meet another migraineur and they start communicating. So what do you feel before? Well, I feel this, I feel that. Wow, I feel that too. And do you feel this? Do you feel this? So it sort of kind of builds up. And this is how I started. It kind of builds up and saying, wait, this is not just me, it is everybody else. And so we have a whole lot of symptoms that are not recorded in literature.
And this is also why I know you're a part of the International Headache Society, I believe I saw.
Right.
And if anyone's ever had a chance to look at the International Headache Society's book on headaches and classifications and migraines, I mean, the migraine section is, you don't just get one, there's like multiple types of migraines, hemiplegic, vision loss, semi-paralysis. I mean, there's some really funky migraines out there. But as you said, it sounds interesting that, would you say all of the people in that group then will have some sort of pre-syndrome, some prodrome?
Right, they do. And what I found really interesting, for which my Facebook migraine group was extremely helpful, is to find out that it really doesn't matter what kind of migraines you have. It could be hemiplegic, where half of your body, any parts, it could be the whole half or just little parts, or it could be that you lose speech, stroke-like symptoms, whatever you have. It really doesn't matter also whether you're an oral migraineur or not. The basic underlying cause is the same. Every single one of them responds identically to the same kind of a procedure, which is what I call the protocol. So if they all respond to the protocol the same way, and I must also add that all of the migraineurs in my groups eventually come off of all of their medications. This is not a request, but they stop having migraines, so they start coming off the medications, and they remain migraine-free based on the same identical protocol. So if you're looking at it that way, basically every single migraine is identical. What differs is what part of the brain is being affected by it.
Well, that makes complete sense. So, because that is what's happening, why you can have such variations in the symptoms of migraines, as we just mentioned. So, what you mentioned there with the causes too, that's a great cue into the next part, because when someone suffers a migraine, it's that horrible quest of going, so what is it? What is causing this thing? Is it because I've had a piece of chocolate, or I've drank too much coffee, or it's genetic, or it's my environment? Could you just go through some of the causes then that you think both do actually cause the problem, and something that it's a myth, people shouldn't even worry about that?
Okay, so there are a couple of answers to this. So let me take the first one. Migraine is genetic. So you really need to be born with a brain that is capable of producing a migraine. A migraine brain is hyperexcitable. And what actually that means is, take, for example, somebody's nose, and a migraineur's nose, my nose, and we have the olfactory bulb that goes into the brain, and it connects to either other neurons, right? In a normal brain, I'm just going to come up with a number here. In a normal brain, assume that the olfactory bulb neurons connect to 10 others, just saying a number here. In a migraine brain, they may connect to 1,000. So the magnitude is huge, but it's only for the sensory organs. When you're talking about the genetics of it, if you don't have this kind of genetics, your chances of getting a migraine is zero. So you need to have this kind of a brain. Now, just because you have that kind of a brain, it doesn't necessarily mean that you end up with a migraine. Like, I have that brain, I've always had that brain, and I haven't had a migraine for quite some time. I can't initiate one because I know how to. So here we come to the food, nutrition, environment, and all of these are factors. In the environment, barometric pressure change causes changes in electrolyte in the body, which then affects the migraineur terribly. full moon will affect the migraineur for somewhat different reason. If we have time, cover that as well. Food. The food is probably the most important, because given the kind of migraine brain, the multiple connections, which are significantly stronger and more powerful, we actually have a lot more communication going on. Excuse me. And communication is voltage. How do you get that voltage? So then you start looking into what creates voltage, what exactly is it, and you discover it's the electrolyte mineral concentration. So when you use a lot more of something, like migraineur brains use a lot more of something, then you tend to run out of it. So you need to replace it. So then the next thing that you look at, what do I do to increase that? And how come that I run out of it so quickly? And so this is something that I totally by surprise found in a medical manual on page 4. And this is an 800-book medical manual. And it's used in emergency rooms. And I don't know why it just doesn't hit anybody in the face. But when you eat carbohydrates, the glucose, when it enters your cells, removes sodium and water from your cells. So here is the basic problem for complete disequilibrium of the electrolytes, the very thing that would create the voltage. And in migraineurs who are predisposed to having a bigger reaction because they're genetically predisposed to have diabetes, the reaction is equivalent to a diabetic reaction, which means it's a huge reaction, and a lot of sodium and a lot of water will be removed, ends up in edema or similar places. So eating food that converts into glucose easily, I'm talking about carbohydrates very specifically, simple carbohydrates, processed food, that kind of carbohydrates, are all 100% migraine makers. So without exception, they will remove enough sodium and water from the body that the migraineur will end up with a migraine. And I go further than that, that even what we call more healthy carbohydrates like fruits and vegetables can also, to some migraineurs, be to the detriment of getting another migraine. So the foods that a migraineur should eat, contrary to many other books out there that suggest just take out the foods like chocolate, which is an irritant because of certain chemicals. No, chocolate is an irritant because it's high in potassium, not enough sodium. So if you're eating chocolate, foolishly enough, with glucose sugar in it, but say if you're eating a totally 100% dark chocolate, you still will get a migraine if you don't salt it.
Okay.
So it's the potassium sodium balance that matters.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you covered quite a lot there, especially with the food and the genetics. So just coming back to the genetics part, then is a 23andMe kind of test useful? So right. If you did one of those, you can sort of see, are you predisposed because you've got that genetic profile?
You don't even have to look at it. If you have migraines, you know that you're predisposed. You can actually go to the human database, human genetic database at genecards.com. And at genecards, you just type in migraines, and the whole migraine profile will show up. And it is ordered in importance. So just look at the first 10. Every single electrolyte pump gate, everything is a mutated form. And while I'm saying mutated is actually a little bit more complicated, this isn't really the mutated form, because my estimation, this is a hypothesis, this has not been proven, but because of the alert brain, if you look at wild animals, look at your cat, look at your dog, their ears are turning all the time. The cats are famous for sleeping with half eye open. They're alert. They're constantly alert. Migraineurs are pretty much the same. So my personal hypothesis, without any proof yet, is that the migraine brain is probably the ancient original human brain. And so those who don't have migraine are probably the ones who are mutated. They're probably adapted to a more modern lifestyle, whereas migraineurs are probably the originals. So if you go back into the tribal life long time ago, perhaps we were the shamans. We were the ones who were tending the fire at night while everybody was sleeping. I don't know. But we have such incredible ability to discover some noise that is above the white noise. And that goes for the scent, the sound, just about anything you can think of, including vision. We don't have good vision, but we have extreme peripheral vision. So if a leaf moves, I may not even see the tree, but a leaf moved and I'm on it. And other people may not react to that.
Okay, that's interesting. So, because that's what you mentioned earlier about the anxiety and the hyperexcitability. So in
Right.
this case, you've got like spidey senses. So
Right.
your vision, your smell, your taste, everything is just on this edge
Right.
system, and it's just looking for something. Hey, what's that? What's that? And it sounds like that's the kind of the way that you're describing that a migraine person's brain is versus someone who doesn't suffer it.
Yes. And I think that the personality goes with that. So what I found in most cases, at least so far, even remotely, as I talked to my migraineurs on Facebook, and some I met in person, and my husband can testify to that we are like Popsy twins. We could very well have all been twins. It's just really amazing that somebody just posted in my group, maybe we all had a single relative somewhere millions of years ago, because we are completely identical. So our personality reflects who we are. We tend to be probably hyper a little bit, triple A personality, always wired, ready to go, and wants to know, feel, and sense everything.
Okay. And what about, we'll get on to the food part because that's going to be a big part. But just before we get to that too, sleep-wise, is there a difference between people who suffer migraines and their sleeping habits? Do they sleep deeper? Do they need to sleep longer? Are they light sleepers? Is there any trend out there?
Yes, that is an amazing question. I'm glad that you brought that up. Migraineurs, because of their half-eye being open, kind of asleep, they're not too much of a deep sleepers. And this is one of the problems with diabetes, as you probably know. And also, we tend to have extremely vivid dreams. Nearly all of us discuss not being able to sleep because you had a dream. You may wake up in the middle of the dream and you remember your dream. I still remember my dream from yesterday, which was really weird and odd. And so we are a little bit restless, I would say. Most migraineurs have some form of problem with sleeping, and it's quite a bit. I'm wearing a Fitbit device to monitor my sleeping, and I can tell whether I did or didn't get a good night's sleep based on how my body is going to respond to my food that I eat, which is a very important part of it. And yes, our sleep is extremely different from other people. I find that, let me backtrack a little bit. So when you're sleeping, your brain actually goes through a particular process. It literally shrinks to allow the fluids to clear fragments and proteins and other things. And in the migraineurs, because their neurons are so many connections and they're so sensitized, as this fluid goes through, it touches the neurons. It literally is a stimulant. So our wild dreams and very vivid imagination in our dreams perhaps are connected to this cleaning mechanism that we are just simply responding to it as though it was a stimuli.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So where you think that sleep should heal, and I bring in the sleep part because a lot of people, when they get a migraine, it's dark room, so they're minimizing the visual sense, and they want it to be quiet, and then and then try sleep to try and get rid of the headache.
Right.
It's crazy to think in a way that as your brain is cleaning itself through that system, that it's actually potentially gently stimulating your neurons.
It does. And so when you have a migraine, you can't actually sleep. But the dark room is probably a very good idea because you're removing a lot of external stimulus otherwise. So migraineurs will have a closed eye. They will have a closed door, so it will be quiet. Everything will be pitch dark. Most of us sleep with an eye mask. I do. If there's any kind of a light or anything, like an alarm clock or whatever, it always gets covered in any hotel room and everywhere. So yes, we tend to navigate toward dark and quiet. But another very important thing happens when you have a migraine is that you don't eat. And that itself, the fasting part, even though you're not aware that you're fasting, but you haven't eaten for a whole day because you had a migraine. And by the way, migraines last longer than a day, usually 3 days, the pain period itself, if you have pain. So if you're not eating for 1 to 3 days, and oftentimes you can't because everything just comes back up. So you may be able to drink water and now supplement salt if you're in my protocol group or read my book. Otherwise, you basically get into the fasting mode of the ketogenic format, which then allows your brain to recover. It's a very interesting process that when you do have a migraine, I just recommend for everyone, don't eat, just drink water and salt.
Okay, because that's a great cue now. So we're going into the nutrition side again of the causes here and also a part of the solution. So your approach then is like a modified ketogenic, modified low carbohydrate kind of hybrid way of doing things, because of, as you've been touching on, is that glucose control, that inability to handle the carbohydrates and putting you at risk of like diabetic type responses. So you're saying another tip here, both to prevent a migraine. I don't know about maybe preventing, but definitely once you're in the throes of a painful situation, that's where the fasting naturally is trying to help you deal with the pain.
Right. And you can actually prevent a migraine because your prodrome period is so long that once you know how to identify that you're actually in a prodrome, this is probably the hardest part of migraine, to discover that, hey, I have a prodrome, so I better act and increase my sodium and increase my water, perhaps stop my carbs, stop eating. If I do that, I actually am preventing my migraines. That's why I haven't had any for a long time. I did a couple of days ago because I ate something that I didn't know had sugar in it, and quite a bit, I think. And it was just meat, by the way. And so a modified diet. And I'm saying modified because a migraineur is, number one, genetically pre-diabetic, no matter what she does or he does. Number two, if we just simply start fasting, we will end up with a migraine because that will induce an electrolyte imbalance. So it has to be done really cleverly, differently from other people. And also, we have a lot of children that we deal with. I deal with children of age 2 who have migraines. So it's not specific to women of the period when they still have menstrual and whatever. That's not true. It's for all age group, and I deal with a lot of boys and men, adult men, some of them over 70 years old. So it really touches everyone. And so we needed to modify the diet. You can't put a 2-year-old on a ketogenic diet. So we had to modify it such that whatever we do is applicable for all, with minor changes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you brought up there is a great point about the difference in age groups and the sex groups. And so if we try to just put it on a single hormonal event like a menstrual cycle, it doesn't explain why a 2-year-old is getting a migraine or a 70-year-old is getting a migraine. Right. But that inability to control the glucose element is the link between all of those people.
Exactly. And it's not just the glucose, it's the insulin. As you know, there are two theories with diabetes. One is on glucose and the other one is on insulin. It is a little bit more complicated when it comes to migraine, but it seems that even a migraineur whose fasting insulin is low is still in insulin trouble. And so we have to look to see what is the insulin response to certain foods. We have trouble identifying that because nobody's measuring insulins. But I just wrote an article a little while ago at hormonesmatter.com, which is not my website. I'm just a blogger there. One of my members, who is, by the way, not a migraineur, but is the sister of a migraineur, joined my ketogenic group. And she went through, she's not in the US, she went through the test, the typical test for the oral glucose tolerance test. So she had the glucose. But in that country, they also did insulin to go with it. It was not a craft in situ, so it was not a 5-hour-long test, just the 1.5 hours, but it was enough to see what was going on, and also urine. And her glucose was completely normal. So measuring glucose in general, I completely agree, is quite meaningless. You need a surrogate, which you talked to Ben Dickman the other day about, actually almost a year ago or 2 months ago, that ketone measured beta hydroxybutyrate can actually be a surrogate for insulin, which is something that I use as well. But it seems that for migraineurs, when I send them for a fasting insulin test and I have a preset form of a list of blood tests and urine tests they need to take and ask the doctor to have. I find that many of my migraineurs have totally healthy insulin, yet they have insulin resistance. So there is something different about a migraineur that is not covered in literature, is not covered by understanding a normal person who's not a migraineur and how they respond to food, glucose, and the insulin. We are somewhat different because we may have completely normal insulin and still be insulin resistant and still have issues and have major problems in response to a lot of foods that other people don't.
Okay. And so would you expect then that when with someone who suffers then with a migraine, that if they eat any sugary foods or sweet foods and it creates that spike, that it doesn't always cause a migraine though? Is it sort of like a threshold point that you, as you said, you're going to catch them at a certain time in their physiology, and then it just can't control it, and they go through a cascade of events?
Exactly. So there are 2 points. That one is a threshold. There was a time when I ran a threshold test in a group, but it ended up giving migraines to everyone, so I stopped doing that. But in that threshold test, they were to drink a certain amount of, that was I think cranberry juice, which is very high in carbohydrates. They were to drink a certain amount of cranberry juice or have a certain amount of box of blueberries. Blueberries are sugar bombs. For most people, they're good fruits, but for migraine, they're sugar bombs. And they're measurable. They're in the USDA database, so I would know how much carbs they ate. And they could measure at what point they no longer get migraine. So they can keep on repeating the test and go down to see their threshold. The problem is that this threshold changes. The threshold changes based on 2 things. One of them is how much fat you're eating with that food. We know that is going to change, also protein, but fat has the most effect. So if I have a threshold, I'm just going to say a number here, 5 carb grams, which is my personal threshold, by the way. If I eat 10, as long as I mix it with fat, I'm fine. If I don't mix it with fat, within an hour, I will be just rolling in pain. So there are differences in how you eat that sugar. And the threshold changes also in terms of where you stand in your insulin resistance. What we found out is when my migraine members joined in my group, and I had them a long time ago do this threshold test, at the beginning, they did not get migraines until maybe about 20, 30 carb grams, because their insulin didn't respond properly. So they were so insulin resistant that it took a long time for the glucose to clear from the blood and get to the organs. But as they get on the low carb, high fat diet and their insulin starts to improve in its sensitivity, their response, their threshold drops. And so there was a lot of complaints. Wait a minute, I used to be able to eat this. Now I can't. I'm getting a migraine from it. What's happening? This is bad. I said, no, this is good. That means you're reversing your insulin resistance. And so you now have a response that you should have had. And so that too changes. We can't really count that threshold. The best way to do it is simply not eat it. That's the best way to do it.
Okay. Well, that point you've just mentioned there about, adopting a low carbohydrate diet, and then suddenly your tolerance sort of lowers and you go, hang on, why can't I handle this? I can relate to that. I know of people who have that exact issue and they think, no, but I used to be able to binge on this and I was fine. Right. But now, like, you just give me a couple of bites of a donut and it just knocks me. I don't feel great at all.
Right. And they're not explaining that to you. It's really difficult to come to understanding what actually that means. It just simply means your glucose is departing from your blood much faster. So everybody measures glucose in blood. The glucose in the blood is not what you're using. It's there to be used. So when you're eating an apple, it has, I believe, approximate average, depending upon what apple I'm talking about, usually the green, sour, Granny Smith, you will have 16 carb grams. Part of it is fructose, part glucose. About 16 is 4 teaspoons, say 2 teaspoons of glucose in that apple. In your entire blood, you only have 1 teaspoon. So if you're eating that apple, you just tripled your amount of glucose in your blood. And that's a medical emergency as far as your blood is concerned. Glucose in the blood for a longer period of time is toxic. So if you're insulin resistant, the amount of glucose in your blood is going to be staying higher longer. And therefore, your reaction to it will be reduced because it's not in your cells. It just didn't get into the interstitial space around the cells or into the cells. And so it's just waiting. what is killing you for being in your blood, you don't necessarily have a reaction to it. But as your insulin starts improving and getting more sensitive and a better response, then you're going to suddenly remove the glucose all at once and deliver it to wherever it needs to go. And so your reaction to it is going to be very quick. And this can also backfire, because if you're on a ketogenic diet or something, your insulin is really low and you're eating something you used to eat, you may not have enough insulin to take it away. So again, you may have a lot of glucose for a long time and it may not clear, and you think you're okay, but you're not okay. This can also cause trouble.
Okay. And what you were talking about earlier, then, what sort of the premise of this problem is that you're losing sodium out of the cells.
Right.
So, and this is where you said even don't just fast if you've got a migraine, because you'll be losing more sodium. It sounds like a solution here is that you take in more salt to try counteract the loss. And
Right.
is that the way that you also then would modify a low carbohydrate or a ketogenic diet for someone who suffers a migraine, that they need to really up their salt level?
They do. We have not measured. Everybody's a little bit different. So we start out at potassium sodium ratio is what we're looking at. So we insist that everybody eats whole food, rich in potassium, no processed foods. And so we used the database, the USDA database, or similar. There's some apps that tell you how much potassium you ate. So we try to match that amount with sodium, not salt, but sodium. So sodium is 40% of salt. In the US, only sodium is marked on boxes. I know in the UK, I think it's salt. So it's a little bit, it gets confusing. We try to match 1-to-1 the sodium to start with. And what we find is later on, people try to increase to the point where the migraines stop showing up. We find that on average, they take about twice as much sodium as potassium. And some of us who are athletes, I do weightlifting and kickboxing and other kind of stuff, I usually take 3 to 4 times as much sodium as potassium.
Okay.
So it's much, much stronger. And also the water. If you look at fasting, particularly when you have a migraine and you don't eat, you're fasting. And so your body is going to be using fat. Fat has a lot of water in it, in triglycerides as it's being stored. And so I believe for each gram of fat you burn, you also lose 4 grams of water, something like that. I'm looking at molecularly. It is for one molecule is 3 molecules plus in the glycerol cap. So you're losing 4 times as much water as fat you're using in terms of grams, not in calories. And so you need to replace all that water as well. But when water clears from the kidney, it also clears sodium. So it isn't just that you're using more sodium in your brain, you actually also clear more sodium as a result of fasting, or because when you eat glucose, it isn't just sodium that it removes, it also removes water. So you have to replace both. But the problem with the water, it doesn't go out of you, it goes into edema. So one of the tests in my book that you may have read is check your rings. If your rings are stuck on your finger, that means you have retained a lot of edema. And so you need to take salt to bring it back into the interstitial space around the cell. In the book, I just referred to in the cell. It's just simpler to say that the interstitial fluid is around the cell. I think of it as a fridge. You just reach out and grab something and you bring it in. That's basically the cell's immediate supply. So that is where the sodium is. But when you ate some glucose or carbohydrates, the sodium and water gets to be kicked out, and the sodium goes straight to the kidneys, but the water doesn't. It's going out the wrong way. It's like for us too, we have one way in and one way out. So you have to sort of kind of process the food the same way internally in the cells as well. So the water has to return into the interstitial space and into the cell in order for it to clear the proper way. And the way to do that is to eat just salt without water. So when somebody ate carbohydrates, say, for whatever reason, I don't eat fruit. Let's say if I eat fruit, and I have just to test it time to time to see if I still have the migraine brain, this kind of have to go for it. If you don't eat salt after that, within a couple of minutes, I will see my eyes going to get smaller, my ring's going to be tight, maybe my ankle will swell. This is typical across the board for all migraineurs. So the edema will go somewhere. We may get a puffy eyelid, whatever way it goes on, wherever it goes, it will go somewhere. And the way to pull it back is to take sodium. This is not specific to migraineurs only, by the way. My daughter-in-law, when she was pregnant 4 years ago, she ate some candy or something, and she was in snow somewhere. And she had on flip-flops on the snow, and she took a photo of that and sent it to me. So I wrote an article on that, and it's on hormonesmatter.com as well. I said, why are you in a flip-flops in the snow, pregnant? What is happening? She said, well, I couldn't put my boots on because my feet were swollen. And so when she came over a couple of days later, she was again in flip-flops. And I said, what is happening? Did you eat something sweet again? She said, yeah, I've been creating a lot of sweets. I said, okay, here's a salt pill. And we have salt capsules, just filled with salt. And I had her take one with a little bit of water, not much, just a sip of water at a time and a later more. Within 15 minutes, she was able to put her shoes back on. It works really quickly, and it's for everybody the same thing. It's only that you don't notice it as badly. You don't realize what is happening, and you don't see it. You don't notice it. It's not important.
So that's interesting about the salt tablets then. So when someone's got a migraine, they reach for a painkiller typically to try dull it. But it sounds like the first thing you would reach for are salt tablets.
Salt, exactly. We have had huge threads. In fact, somebody just started a thread on Botox, I believe, and it's already like 200 comments long in that it's not working for anyone. There are no painkillers for migraine that actually work, because migraine pain is a symptom that you may be able to remove temporarily for a short time by certain magical medicines. Sometimes triptans work a little bit, but not much for some different reasons. But the underlying migraine is still there, so you're still sick. It's not just the pain. You can have a headache, and yes, you feel terrible, but it comes with so many other side effects. You still can't think, you still can't talk, you still are confused, you may not even remember the name of your spouse, you still can't eat, you still vomiting everything up, and you have all kinds of other illnesses going on. It's not just a headache. So by making a headache go away, great, I'm still sick. So what good is that going to do?
So if someone's in a lot of pain, are the situations where you would say take some more salt now? I'm thinking, is it even practically that someone would take a couple of teaspoons of salt?
No. Okay, so we have actually 2 steps to this, because we don't know if it is salt that is missing, or it could be potassium that is missing.
Okay.
It may even be carbs that is missing for somebody who is just switching from a regular SAD diet to the low carbohydrate diet. So we use what's called the salt test. And the salt test, you just grab it itty bitty. Really, it is just a tiny bit, few crystals, and put it under your tongue. Because when you put it under your tongue, it bypasses your stomach, goes through the mucus, and goes directly to the blood circulation. And if it is salt that your body needed, your migraine will ease a little bit.
Okay.
So if you have an aura, we tried it with people who didn't have pain, and that was from the UK actually. She was having an aura, and she wrote it kind of garbled because of the aura. She couldn't actually. She had one of these zigzag kind of auras, and we told her to put salt under her tongue just a little bit, and she said, "Oh, it's getting better." So it started to sort of kind of ebb and flow, so it's going away. So then we said, okay, so then take 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. 1/8 is what. It's an arbitrary number, but it seems to be working for everyone. So that seems to be the magic number. That is about 300 milligrams sodium. So then we tell them to take that much salt. 1/8 of a teaspoon salt, or in the US, we can also purchase them in salt pills or salt capsules. And it usually helps. And then we can ask, well, what is it that caused this? What did you eat? What did you drink? Were you out on the heat? Were you in a cold? What happened? Did you exercise too much? What exactly happened? So once we know what happened, then the pain level or the aura or whatever the symptoms they have went to the point where they can actually think. The problem is that they also have brain fog. So when we have brain fog, we can't think. We can't even read the book. That's one of my complaints from a lot of migraineurs. Can you make this available in audio? Because I can't read. So they have a lot of issues, a lot of problems at that time. So we sort of kind of have to knock them out of there. If the salt doesn't work on their tongue, then there's a good chance that they need potassium. So then I will ask, well, how your rings, what's happening with your rings. Most of them don't wear rings, like I don't wear rings, so it's kind of difficult to tell. So then they may try to put the ring on to see if it's loose or not loose. If it is not loose, if it is too tight, or if it is too loose. If it's too loose, you need more sodium. If it's too tight, that means you need to release the extra water that you have in your system. So then you need to eat food that is potassium. We don't supplement potassium because that bypasses the route of the electrolytes. So that will just dehydrate the blood. That's not what we want to do. We literally would like to dehydrate the cells a little bit rather than the blood. So then we'll ask them to eat an avocado, or have some salmon or some food that is high in potassium and it's easy for them to digest, whoever you are. And that takes a little longer because it has to go through the metabolic process. It takes usually about an hour before that starts working. And if that doesn't work, then we will end up providing a large dose of water and potassium and sodium, and that usually works.
Okay, so it's like that's your first aid kind of situation then. Right. So you can do the sodium route. If that doesn't work, potassium route with a bit of food. If that doesn't work, you hit a bomb with water, sodium, and potassium.
Right, exactly. And that usually works for everyone. So in the first edition of my book, which I have totally modified in my second one, which you referred to, I actually called on eating a McDonald's hamburger, just a burger, not the bun and not everything else, but the actual burger. Because even today, I'm not telling them to go to McDonald's, but I said, okay, make yourself a burger, put some cheese on it or whatever, put a lot of salt on it, and just eat the burger as is, because the burger is very high potassium. And if they put cheese on it, that will add additional fat, with butter on it, and salt is really good. Or eat it with pickles or something that is really salty. So they're getting a whole lot of everything, and drink water with it. They're not eating carbs that much. There's no carbs in protein. In pickles, yes, maybe 1 gram. Ignore that, doesn't matter. And then usually within an hour, it starts to lift. It's a very interesting effect.
I like that idea, though. I mean, I know we're talking about a fast food chain here, and people would go, McDonald's, no ways. I'm on a keto diet or a low-carb diet for weight loss. I don't want to be going to fast food restaurants. But I mean, that to me is also, it's scalable, it's accessible. Anywhere in the world, suddenly you've got this headache going, oh no, it's kicking off. And you just find a fast food place that does burgers. Right. And as you said, you get the actual meat, the burger patty, and then you just salt it and you try to eat that to...
I specifically said McDonald's because a lot of other burger patty places that I found that in Hawaii, unfortunately, they put flour into the burger to hold it together.
Okay.
So McDonald's apparently changed. I was just told that, I didn't know. And I checked online. They changed their menu, their ingredients, and they no longer put any flour into the burger. So if you have to eat fast food, some of the things that I would recommend if you're traveling and that's all you have, indeed, do go and get a McDonald's burger, just a burger and nothing else. Maybe cheese on it. Also, they use American cheese, which is vegetable oil. So you may want to choose something else. Or in the US, we have El Pollo Loco, which is just chicken on the grill. Perfect. Have that. So there are some places where you can go and pick and choose of what you can pick from the fast food if you have no alternative options. Although we recommend Whole Foods, but if you're traveling, you can't.
Yeah. There's practical situations when you're outside of your home environment, your base, and that happens. When a migraine can hit you at any time. You're out at a social event or wherever. So it
usually hits when you're out at a social event. That is a very typical scenario.
And that links into that hyperexcitability and your spidey senses and all that kicking off. Just keeping on the food topic, though, my wife wants me to ask you about this one then, is smoked foods, because do they cause any issues? So I live in a place where they do smoked kippers, which is a form of fish, and mackerel and that, but that can kick off a migraine event.
It can, yeah. In fact, I was just having a conversation a couple of weeks ago. I have a member from Alaska where they traditionally prepare smoked salmon, for example. We have to understand how it is made. If it is just simply put into the smoke, you're probably fine. If it is brined in salt first, which is usually what they do, then you're not fine. Because whatever potassium was in the meat or fish or whatever you're eating smelled, if it is salt brined, the goal of the salt brining itself is to bring out all the electrolyte and all the blood from the meat or the fish. So it's basically just pure protein, but you end up with a little bit of fat. But it has no longer any water, any juice, anything. That's the goal of smoking, to dry it out. So once you dried it out, all electrolyte ingredients, sodium, potassium, magnesium, everything basically comes out of it.
Ah, interesting. Okay. So, and if you salted the fish, that doesn't solve the solution because that's just adding a sodium.
Exactly.
But
yeah, you need to eat it with something potassium. So if you eat smoked fish with an avocado, you're perfect, because then you're matching it. You're still going to miss a lot of the nutrients. You're going to miss magnesium and other things from the fish itself, whatever it had. I don't know what happens to the omega-3s, for example. I have no idea. So it just causes a lot of changes. It's basically processed food. If you're looking at smoked food, it's processed.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting way to explain it, because we were thinking, is it more the histamine route that's causing some sort of inflammatory response?
Right. And that can also participate, by the way. So you have to understand why. Histamines, it's a natural thing for the body that anything you eat or drink is not you. So you will have some kind of a reaction, immune response to what you eat or drink. And if it is some kind of a pathogen or some kind of a food that you may be allergic to or sensitive to, your body will launch itself via antihistamines. And the goal of the antihistamines is to take it out of your body somehow. So what it's going to do is going to collect all the water from wherever it can. So it will literally dehydrate you to get rid of it. So if, for example, you get runny nose, why is it runny? Well, it's all the water that's suddenly went into the mucus that is helping to empty the whatever pathogen that is invading it. So it's the same kind of process. So if it's a histamine, yes, if you're sensitive to that particular thing, it's not the histamine itself, but it's something that is initiating an antihistamine response that you're basically talking about. And that can cause a migraine because it can dehydrate you, thereby completely rearranging your electrolyte.
Okay. And then with coffee, because coffee is a common thing. Yeah, you explained the chocolate one nicely earlier on. Is coffee a trigger because it also influences your electrolyte balance? I had Dr. James D. Nicolantonio on from the Salt Fix book, and he was talking about coffee drinkers need to add more salt into their diet naturally. Is that something, with someone who suffers a migraine, do you recommend they just stay off coffee? Or if they do enjoy coffee, should they be doing something like you just mentioned with the fish, that they need to be supplementing on the side with something?
So let me tell you how migraineurs drink coffee. We actually salt our coffee. We don't drink coffee without salt. It's just a salt shaker, salt into the coffee. So that already explains part of what you just said, and I completely agree with the Salt Fix book. I think he's even a little bit conservative with the 3,500 milligrams sodium that he's talking about there. If you watch some of his videos, he actually eats more for his workouts. I personally look at caffeine as medicine. There are many medicines that actually contain caffeine. And if you look at why triptans work for migraineurs, it's because triptan is a vasoconstrictor. It does the same as a cup of coffee, just in a larger magnitude. And so we let our migraineurs have coffee if they wish, but maximum 1 cup a day. And if they feel like any other coffee later, they can have decaffeinated coffee 2 cups a day, because that one has much less caffeine. It's not so important. But we reserve the coffee for the times when they are fighting a prodrome. Because another trick that is really not known anywhere, I think I found one article that discussed that migraineurs, when they're not in a migraine, have major low blood pressure. That's the other problem with also insulin sensitivity and diabetes. Migraineurs have very low blood pressure. I have a questionnaire that people have to answer. I believe it's 18 questions now. I keep on changing that and improving it. That when migraineur comes in, they have to fill out that questionnaire, send it to me via personal messaging on Facebook so I can see what they're doing wrong and I can help them start up to go to what I call baseline. And I can see that I would estimate the average blood pressure of a migraineur from about 4,000 migraineurs to be under 100/70, 100/60, under that. So oftentimes I see 90/50. I came home from weightlifting the other day and I just wanted to check. And I just finished eating 3 salt pills. So we're talking about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and had 3 glasses of water with it. And after that, I came upstairs to check my blood pressure. It was 96/60, I think it was. So that is such an incredibly low blood pressure if you're looking at it that way, that we do need that caffeine time to time to increase the blood pressure, particularly some migraineurs who do sleep very deep. They may, during the night, even the heart relaxes a little bit, their blood pressure may drop into the danger zone, and then they wake up with a migraine. So a caffeine is a tool for us. If you wake up with a migraine at 3 o'clock in the morning, take salt and water and have maybe 2 teaspoons of some coffee, because it's going to constrict the blood vessel just enough. And it's not going to keep you up. 2 teaspoons of coffee is not going to keep you up, but it's a very little caffeine, but it's just enough caffeine at that time of the night to give a little bit of squeeze and increase your blood pressure until the morning when you can get up and have your coffee.
That is so fascinating, because I have come across people who get headaches in the middle of the night and they just can't explain. Like, I was laying in bed and it hit me. Woke me up from my sleep. So, and also I have a family member who suffers badly with migraines, so I can relate to a lot of these questions here, but they have low blood pressure. That's exactly what so right. What you've just said there is like, wow.
This is one of my exclusion criteria. When people come in, one of my questions is, what is your blood pressure? Where does your head hurt? What kind of prodromes you have? And I get questions like, what is a prodrome? Or I get, well, my blood pressure is 130 over something. Even 120/80, which is the norm. I say, are you sure that you're a migraineur? That's too high for a migraineur. When you're looking at 99% of the migraineurs are under 100/60 or whatever that is. 120/80, as normal as it is, doesn't sound like a migraineur unless it's a medication caused.
Okay. That would be interesting if you've done a lot of research and reading with papers, and you said there's no papers that have sort of looked at people who naturally are I say naturally, that they have these low pressures, blood pressures, but are they more predisposed then to be migraine sufferers?
They're more predisposed, generally speaking, probably to headaches because migraine requires a migraine brain. So the combination of the two is a really bad combination. But you can get really bad headaches from having low blood pressure. It's natural. You're not getting enough oxygen. You're not getting enough nutrients from your blood to your brain. So eventually the brain is going to say, quits. That's it. You will get a pain as a wake-up call. And if you don't know what it is and you don't know what to do with it, you may pass out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we've covered so many good points there. We've talked about the symptoms, the causes, there's lots of actionable tips that you can both test yourself, figure out how to do emergency care. But then just to touch on long-term care, you would say adopting a modified way of eating is the way to go. Modified low carb, modified ketogenic way of eating is a treatment solution to manage the headaches in the long term.
It is. There's a caveat, is that ketogenic diet, you probably are familiar with, interacts with a lot of medications. And I started to study into the pharmacology, and one of the reasons why is because they have to know when to deactivate. They have to be able to exit from the metabolic process. And in the ketogenic diet, we don't have the Krebs cycle the same way as you do in the carbohydrate diet, so the medications sort of kind of get lost. And a lot of them have very serious side effects. So somebody on medications, I have a ketogenic group that I call Keto Mild. I won't let them go on a ketogenic diet. So they first have to get through my protocol. The protocol allows them to start reducing their carbohydrates. It's a sugar-free and sugar substitutes-free, because sugar substitutes also spike insulin. We have a problem with insulin, so I don't let anybody have any, even natural stevia, no, nothing. So they can come off of all their carbohydrates. They can quit all the sugar substitutes. They have to quit grains. That is one of our biggest problems. They also have to quit all starches. So potatoes and other kind of things. If they eat, it has to be after they're already migraine free, and a little bit if they can control. It's a different story. But initially, they have to come off of all of that. All of their teas. Teas are diuretic for migraineurs. Doesn't matter what kind. So they have to come to completely what I call baseline. Increase their salt, increase their water. Many of them come in drinking 2 glasses of water a day. So we calculate how many glasses of water they need based on their weight. And for women, it's 55%. And for men, it's 75%. It's a different calculation. And so they have to increase the water very slowly. Their kidneys are giving them heart trouble, and they get edema. So it's a process. And once they're at baseline and they start becoming pain-free, then if they eventually want to go to the ketogenic diet, they will have to start coming off of their medications. So I provide a schedule that their doctor has to approve. I have 2 kind of schedules. One would be for the addictive medications, and one would be for not so addictive but difficult to come off, like Topomax, for example. And the standard pharmaceutical directions are a little bit too fast for migraineurs, and they will end up going back on the drugs. So mine is much slower, so they have to take that to their doctors. I also have them do this blood test so I could see what kind of vitamins, minerals, what other kind of problems we face. Migraineurs, a lot of them, the majority have a mutation in B vitamins, so we can't methylate B vitamins, so we have to take a special kind. Several of us can absorb A vitamins from vegetables, for example. I can't. I have to eat cod liver oil for that. So there are some tricks in migraineurs that are different from other people. So I have everybody take that blood test. It's quite a significant blood test that they have to take, and also urine test to see if the B vitamin they're urinating out or not. And homocysteine is an important factor as well. And some I also send to the calcium coronary artery scan because their cholesterol is all over the place and their triglycerides are high. I just would like to see what's happening. And once they have done all that and they started to come off the medication, if they're really close to having almost no medication at all, then they can start joining the keto group and start learning what it takes to be on the ketogenic diet and slowly start to modify. So we don't jump like in other people start ketogenic diet 5-day fast. You can't do that to a migraineur. It's going to end up in a migraine. And they will overshoot with runaway ketones, and they will end up with an extremely hypoglycemic event. So it doesn't work for migraineurs.
That is such a great tip. So you have a sector, a population base who can't just jump straight into a heavy fasting ketogenic lifestyle because it could actually be causing the headaches, right. And they're usually jumping into a new way of eating to try to fix a problem anyway, and then that must be so frustrating. But the B vitamins that you were mentioning there, again, the same family member I'm thinking about, their symptoms with their migraine have improved since they started taking more B vitamins. And that's exactly what you've been sort of saying there.
Depends on what kind of B vitamins. So if you're taking a multi-B, those are synthetics. It assumes that your body knows how to methylate them. But if your body knows how to methylate B vitamins, why would you need to take B vitamins? It's sort of kind of counterintuitive because the foods that you eat have a lot of B vitamins in them. And particularly if you're on a low-carb diet and you're eating a lot of meat, you have a lot of B vitamins coming in. Why can't you absorb it? Because you can't methylate. So it doesn't make sense then to take another B vitamin, which is, again, non-methylated, and it would require your body to methylate it. So I have a list of chemical names, not necessarily brand names, although now I listed a couple of brands because I discovered that from my experience and some of other people that some of the sublingual types are better in longevity. So they actually literally work, particularly for those who have high homocysteine levels. I was able to bring some people's homocysteine levels down within the relatively normal range from very high ranges. One even had a heart attack before he joined the migraine group. and it was a vegan, by the way, oil-free vegan, just a side note. And so they need to look at the blood test completely bare. So I'll ask everybody to quit all vitamins and supplements, not the medications, but the supplements and vitamins for 2 weeks before they go for a blood test, because some of the vitamins have half-life of 6 days to 10 days. Like B vitamins are very typical for that. And so they go to get a blood test 2 weeks after they quit, and then we get a result to see are they able to methylate or not. And then they will start taking the B vitamins. And then the next test that they will have whenever, 3 months, 6 months, a year, they will continue taking the B vitamins, and we're going to get the same test. So I can see whether they're actually absorbing the B vitamins.
Okay.
And then we can see whether they improve or they don't.
So with all this testing, it sounds like is this all a part of your protocol, or someone could do this as like a migraine coaching directly with you? Is this an option that people have?
Yes. In fact, I started a nonprofit. My husband did, actually. I didn't think about such clever this idea. I'm doing this for free, not for money, but he went after a nonprofit to help me to hire, or not hire, but to allow members who would like to become particular area representatives of the Stanton Migraine Protocol. So I have one already established in Maine, who is still a migraineur of mine, but he doesn't have migraines anymore. He's completely able to prevent his, and he's a PhD. And he is a psychologist, so he had a business, so he added a migraine to it. So he's a migraine-free executive, and so he's in consulting. So yes, so we are open to licensees to come in. It is almost completely free. We're not doing it for money. We're doing it to spread the information so that the migraineurs around the world can come off of medications and use a medication-free procedure. I have not taken a medication. I still have some. I think I'm going to keep it for life. This is a momentum, from my life. But when you're not taking medications for 6-7 years, your body changes. It's really amazing how much change you go through. And I think it is very important to spread this word to everyone who is a migraineur to have them alive. I have a lot of sports people. I have triathletes. An Algerian football, I can't say his name, but he's on my team, my migraine group as well. I have a jazz singer. I have a lot of marathon runners. Like I said, I was a weightlifter. It's just a lot of people on, with migraine that once you remove the pain and the discomfort that goes with it, they return. They start doing marathons and they're winning, and they're either on the local private or on the ketogenic diet, doesn't matter, but they improve on their performance tremendously and they don't get migraines. It's just such an incredible thing. So we want to spread the word all around the world and getting as many representatives as possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know, but when someone's a migraine sufferer, it is a problem with the medications, the over-medication problem. Just trying to take any kind of painkiller, taking too many painkillers just to try and control it all the time, and it's not a solution.
No.
So it is nice. That's why I wanted to get you on to find solutions, and you've definitely given some really good food for thought for a lot of people, I think. So what are some links or resources now that people could be in contact with you or follow you? Do you have anything you'd like to share?
I have a lot of them, yes. The easiest way to get through to me is by sending me a request for contact on stantonmigraineprotocol.com. That is the easiest to remember. Also on Facebook, they can find me under my name, Angela Stanton. One of them is his PhD, and the other one is a doctor. It doesn't matter. They can find me, and the logo that I have is the same as the little image on the book, so they can kind of associate with it. I also have another with migraine-book.com, and then I have an advocate site. So if they want to read about the bad medications, some of the regulations, new drugs like the Aimovig that just came out, I just wrote a big article on that. They can visit my advocate blog site, a blog called cluelessdoctors.com, one word.
Okay, well, all those links, I'll put them in the show notes for people so that they can easily find them.
And then just one more that I'm going to send you is Hormones Matter. I have a special link to my articles. I specialize a lot in migraine, nutrition, diabetes. That is my focus. So they they can have a lot of articles to read there.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Well, and there's also your book, which covers a lot of this stuff in there. And again, I'll link to that.
Right.
But Angela, I just want to say again, thank you so much for all the knowledge bombs that you've dropped on people today. I know we went a bit heavy in the beginning there, and there was some little bit technical things, and I hope we didn't lose people too much, but we sort of broadened it out and we came up with a lot of actionable tips from that. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that information.
Thank you very much. Really appreciated being part of this. Thank you.